Blood stained the sidewalk as Tasha Richardson lay motionless. Officer Kelson reloaded his weapon. A phone rang from her purse. The military ID on screen read, Colonel Jamal Richardson. Within hours, tanks would roll into Westridge, and America would never be the same. Before I reveal what happened next in this shocking true story, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. This story about racial injustice and a mother's sacrifice will shake you to your core. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens when the U.S. military confronts a corrupt police department. Now, let's rewind to how this all began. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the tree-lined streets of Westridge, Georgia, as Tasha Richardson made her way home. At 62 years old, Tasha was a fixture in the community, having worked as the head librarian at Westridge Public Library for over 30 years. Today, she had spent hours volunteering at a voter registration drive specifically aimed at increasing turnout in the historically black neighborhoods of Westridge. The session had been successful, despite the intimidation tactics that had become increasingly common in recent months. Several young people had registered despite the presence of self-appointed poll watchers, taking photographs and asking intrusive questions. Tasha had stood firm, calmly informing the intimidators about the legal rights of all citizens to register without harassment. "Your vote is your voice," she had told one nervous young woman, "and there are those who fear what will happen when we all speak together." As she walked, Tasha's thoughts drifted to her son, Jamal. At 38, Colonel Jamal Richardson had risen through the ranks of the United States Army to become one of the most respected special operations commanders in the military. His work with Delta Force kept him deployed for months at a time, and his classified status meant their conversations were often brief and vague. She missed him terribly, but understood the importance of his service. The last time they spoke, he had sounded tired, but promised to visit soon. "After this deployment, Mom, things are complicated right now, but I'll make it work." That had been 3 weeks ago. Tasha turned onto Maple Avenue, an affluent street that provided a shortcut to her modest home just 6 blocks away. She had walked this route hundreds of times over the years, nodding politely to neighbors who had grown accustomed to seeing the dignified black woman pass by. Today, however, something felt different. The sensation of being watched prickled at the back of her neck. 2 police cruisers rolled slowly down the street, and Tasha maintained her steady pace, clutching her canvas tote bag containing voter registration materials. The lead cruiser suddenly accelerated, pulled ahead of her, and stopped. The second positioned itself behind her. 4 doors opened simultaneously as officers Ryan Kelson and James Barrett emerged with hands already resting on their holstered weapons. "Ma'am, I need to see some identification right now." Officer Kelson called out, his voice carrying an edge that immediately put Tasha on alert. At 42, Kelson had a reputation in the black community for escalation and aggression, though his personnel file remained suspiciously clean. "May I ask why you need my identification, officer? I'm simply walking home." Tasha responded calmly, stopping at a respectful distance. "We've received reports of suspicious activity in the area." Officer Barrett interjected. At 35, he was newer to the force, but already falling into the department's problematic patterns. "A resident called about someone who doesn't belong in this neighborhood." In his living room, just 50 feet away, Gordon Phillips, a 67-year-old white resident, peered through his blinds. It was Phillips who had called the police about the suspicious person walking through his neighborhood. He had seen Tasha countless times before, but today decided her presence warranted police intervention. "I live just 6 blocks away on Cedar Street. I've walked this route for years," Tasha explained, maintaining her composure despite the implicit accusation. "I'm going to need to see some ID right now," Kelson repeated, taking a step closer, his hand now fully resting on his weapon. "I'll provide my ID, but I'd like to know if I'm being detained, and for what reason," Tasha said, slowly reaching for her purse. "Just do what we say and there won't be any problems," Barrett responded, moving to flank her. "Stop right there, hands where I can see them," Kelson suddenly shouted as Tasha reached for her bag. "I'm just getting my identification as you requested," Tasha explained, freezing in place. Her heart pounded, but decades of navigating these situations as a black woman in America had taught her to remain outwardly calm. "I'm going to reach into my purse very slowly." "Do it carefully," Kelson ordered, his gun now drawn and pointed at her. Tasha's fingers trembled slightly as she opened her purse. Her phone began to vibrate. Jamal's weekly check-in call was right on schedule. The sudden noise startled Officer Kelson. "Gun! She's got a gun!" he shouted. "No, it's just my phone." Tasha tried to explain instinctively, reaching to show them. 3 shots rang out in rapid succession. Tasha felt an explosion of pain in her chest and abdomen. The impact knocked her backward onto the pristine sidewalk. Her purse fell, spilling its contents. Blood bloomed across her light blue blouse as she gasped for breath. Her phone skidded across the concrete, still ringing, the screen illuminated with her son's military ID photo and the text, "Colonel Jamal Richardson calling." Officer Kelson approached cautiously, weapon still drawn, while Barrett called in, "Shots fired, suspect down," on his radio. Through dimming vision, Tasha saw Officer Kelson reload his weapon as he stood over her. She tried to speak, to reach for her phone, to tell her son she loved him one last time. The world faded to darkness as sirens wailed in the distance. The last thing Tasha Richardson saw was her son's face on her phone screen, unaware that the call had connected moments before the shots were fired, that Jamal had heard everything, and that in his position of military power, he was already setting in motion a response that would shake the foundations of systemic injustice across the nation. Colonel Jamal Richardson sat stone-faced in the Pentagon's secure conference room as the Joint Task Force meeting about terrorist threats in the Horn of Africa abruptly lost his attention. The phone call to his mother had connected, but instead of her warm greeting, he heard muffled voices shouting, and then 3 distinct gunshots, followed by a chaotic aftermath of radio calls and sirens. 20 years of military experience had trained him to recognize gunfire instantly. The sound of his mother gasping for breath sent ice through his veins. Jamal had built his career overcoming the additional barriers black officers faced in the military's highest echelons. At 38, he had already earned the respect of the Joint Chiefs for his tactical brilliance and unwavering leadership in the most classified operations of the past decade. His Delta Force team had rescued hostages, eliminated high-value targets, and gathered intelligence that had saved countless American lives. Through it all, he had maintained his composure under the most extreme pressure situations imaginable. Nothing had prepared him for hearing his mother being shot. "Colonel Richardson, is everything all right?" General Hayes asked, noticing the sudden change in his protégé's demeanor. Hayes, a 65-year-old white man with a progressive mindset, had mentored Jamal since his West Point days, recognizing talent, regardless of race, in a military still struggling with systemic biases. "Family emergency, sir. I need to be excused." Jamal responded, already activating the tracking software on his phone to pinpoint his mother's location in Westridge, Georgia. The connection remained open, and he could hear someone saying, "No weapon found, just a phone and some papers." His mother had been unarmed. "Go. Take whatever time you need." Hayes ordered, concern evident in his eyes as Jamal strode from the room, already making calls to his most trusted team members. Within 30 minutes, Jamal had assembled a 4-person team and secured a military transport to Georgia. Captain Maya Williams, his communications specialist and second-in-command, had already hacked into the Westridge Police Department's dispatch system. "Sir, I've confirmed that your mother was shot by police officers on Maple Avenue at 1600 hours. She's been transported to Memorial Hospital in critical condition. The officers are claiming she made threatening movements and they feared for their lives. Jamal's jaw clenched as he processed the information. Standard police justification for shooting unarmed black civilians. What else? The responding officers were Ryan Kelson and James Barrett. Kelson fired the shots. 3 rounds, sir. And there's something else, the department's already closing ranks. Body camera footage has been marked as corrupted. Convenient timing. The transport landed at a private airfield outside Westridge 3 hours after the shooting. Jamal, now dressed in civilian clothes, arrived at Memorial Hospital to find 2 uniformed officers stationed outside the intensive care unit. "Sir, you can't go in there. Police investigation," one officer stated, moving to block his path. "That's my mother in there," Jamal replied, his voice dangerously calm. "I'm Colonel Jamal Richardson, United States Army Delta Force. And unless you want to explain to your superiors why you obstructed a military officer from seeing his critically injured mother, I suggest you step aside." The officers exchanged nervous glances before reluctantly moving. Inside, Tasha lay unconscious, connected to various machines monitoring her vital signs. A surgeon approached, clipboard in hand. "Colonel Richardson, I'm Dr. Santos. Your mother suffered 3 gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. We've managed to stabilize her for now, but she's not out of danger. 1 bullet damaged her liver, another punctured her lung, and the third is lodged dangerously close to her spine. We need to operate again once she's strong enough." Jamal nodded, taking his mother's hand gently. "Thank you, doctor. I want a military medical team brought in to consult and the highest security protocols implemented. No one enters this room without my approval." As if on cue, his phone rang. Police Chief Warren Richards was requesting a meeting in the hospital cafeteria. The 60-year-old chief had cultivated a reputation for professionalism in public while maintaining the department's problematic practices behind closed doors. "Colonel Richardson, let me first express my sincere regrets about this unfortunate incident." Richards began as Jamal sat across from him, his face impassive. "Unfortunate incident. Your officer shot my unarmed 62-year-old mother 3 times while she was walking home. This wasn't an incident. It was attempted murder." Richards cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Our officers responded to a call about a suspicious person. When your mother reached suddenly into her bag—" "Cut the rehearsed statement, Chief," Jamal interrupted. "I was on the phone with her when your officers opened fire. I heard everything. Where's the body camera footage?" "Unfortunately, there appears to have been a technical malfunction with both officers' cameras. These things happen in the field." "Both cameras simultaneously malfunctioned at the exact moment your officers decided to shoot an unarmed black woman. That's quite a coincidence." Richards shifted in his seat. "Colonel, I understand you're upset, but I suggest you let our internal affairs handle this investigation. Your military status doesn't give you jurisdiction here." Jamal leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let me be absolutely clear, Chief Richards. I have resources and authority you can't begin to comprehend. If your department attempts to cover this up, if my mother dies because of your officers' actions, there will be consequences that extend far beyond Westridge. The full weight of military intelligence will expose every corrupt corner of your department." Richard's face paled slightly. "Are you threatening me, Colonel?" "I'm making you a promise. Justice will be served one way or another." After Richards departed, Jamal made 3 critical phone calls. The first was to General Hayes, briefing him on the situation and requesting special resources. The second was to a contact in the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The third was to Captain Williams, who had already established a surveillance operation around the hospital and police department. "Maya, I want everything. Every email, text message, and phone call between the officers involved and department leadership. I want to know who called in the complaint and why. And I need eyes on Chief Richards. He's hiding something bigger than a standard police shooting cover-up." Already on it, sir. And Colonel Military Intelligence just flagged something interesting. Your mother's name appeared on a watch list we intercepted 2 months ago. A list of black community leaders targeted for harassment. This wasn't random. She was specifically targeted. FBI agent Naomi Chen stared at her computer screen, the patterns finally becoming clear after months of investigation. At 36, Chen had built her career investigating civil rights violations, often facing resistance from within the Bureau itself. The spreadsheet before her contained details of 47 separate incidents across 12 states, all targeting black community leaders involved in voter registration or education efforts. Tasha Richardson's name had been highlighted in red, along with the notation, High Priority Neutralization. What kind of organization would target a 62-year-old librarian as a threat requiring neutralization? The answer was beginning to take shape, and it reached far beyond the West Ridge Police Department. Agent Chen picked up her secure phone and dialed a number few people had access to. Colonel Richardson, this is Special Agent Chen, FBI Civil Rights Division. We need to talk about your mother and a pattern of incidents I've been tracking. Across town, Police Chief Warren Richards entered the wood-paneled study of Victor Hargrove's mansion. At 70, Hargrove had built his fortune in private prisons and defense contracting, using his wealth to influence politics throughout the Southeast. Mayor David Collins was already seated by the fireplace, nursing a glass of bourbon. At 63, Collins had held office for 3 terms, each victory secured by increasingly suspicious margins. We have a situation, Richards announced without preamble. Tasha Richardson's son is a Delta Force colonel with high-level Pentagon connections. He's already making noise threatening investigations. Hargrove remained impassive, swirling his drink. One soldier, even a colonel, can be managed. What concerns me is Richardson's voter registration activities. Our sources indicated she was close to reaching the numbers that could swing the district. That's why she was on the list. The list that you assured me was untraceable. Collins interjected, his voice tight with anxiety. Now we have military intelligence potentially involved. The operation extends far beyond West Ridge, Hargrove replied calmly. 36 cities, 12 states, all coordinated to ensure the right electoral outcomes. Too much money and power at stake to be concerned about one overzealous colonel. He has resources, Richards insisted. And his mother survived the shooting. If she wakes up and testifies, then ensure she doesn't wake up. Hargrove cut in coldly. Hospital security can be compromised. Medications can be tampered with. Problems have solutions, gentlemen. What none of them realized was that their conversation was being recorded by surveillance equipment Captain Williams had installed hours earlier. At Memorial Hospital, Dr. Santos made a disturbing discovery during Tasha's follow-up examination. Colonel Richardson, one of the bullets appears to have been deliberately left inside your mother during the initial surgery. It's positioned in a way that's causing internal bleeding. We need to operate immediately. Jamal's team quickly secured the operating room, bringing in a military surgical specialist who confirmed the sabotage. This was intentional. The bullet could have been easily removed during the first procedure. Someone wanted to ensure she wouldn't survive long-term. Outside the hospital, the first protesters had begun to gather as news of the shooting spread through West Ridge's black community. What began as a dozen people holding candles grew to over 100. Within hours, their chants for justice echoing through the night. The local news coverage initially repeated the police department's version of events, an unfortunate incident where officers feared for their lives when a suspicious person made threatening movements. But Olivia Dela Cruz, a 34-year-old investigative journalist with the Atlanta Tribune, had received an anonymous tip and traveled to West Ridge to investigate. Colonel Richardson, I'm Olivia Dela Cruz. I believe we have mutual interests in exposing what's really happening here. Have you ever wondered why certain communities face disproportionate police violence? Comment number 1. If you believe systemic racism plays a role in how police interact with black citizens, Comment number 2. If you think better training could prevent tragedies like Tasha's shooting, this story exposes a conspiracy far deeper than a single incident of police brutality. Like and subscribe if you want to understand how voter suppression and violence against Black communities are connected in America today. What sinister forces would target a respected librarian for neutralization, and how high does this conspiracy go? Let's continue with the investigation that shook the Pentagon itself. General Robert Hayes had seen war in 4 countries across 3 continents during his 40-year military career. He had commanded troops in combat, authorized classified operations in hostile territory, and navigated the treacherous waters of Pentagon politics. But the evidence Colonel Richardson had just presented left even his battle-hardened composure shaken. "This goes beyond police misconduct, sir," Jamal explained, gesturing to the documents spread across the secure briefing room table. "My mother was specifically targeted because of her voter registration work, and she's not the only one. Agent Chen from the FBI has identified 47 similar cases across 12 states, all targeting Black community leaders." General Hayes studied the surveillance photos and transcripts of conversations between Chief Richards Mayor Collins and Victor Hargrove. "And you've confirmed Hargrove's financial connections to this operation?" "Yes, sir. His companies have channeled over $30 million through shell corporations to fund this nationwide voter suppression network. They're using local police departments to intimidate, harass, and in my mother's case, attempt to eliminate community organizers who might increase Black voter turnout." Hayes' straightened decision made. "This constitutes a direct threat to constitutional rights and the democratic process. I'm authorizing a special military intelligence operation. This remains classified at the highest level. The Joint Chiefs and Secretary of Defense will be briefed only after we've secured actionable evidence." Back in Westridge, the protests had grown to over 500 people with supporters arriving from neighboring communities. The police response escalated accordingly, with officers in riot gear forming lines around the station and hospital. Chief Richards had requested additional resources from neighboring jurisdictions, creating a small army of law enforcement facing off against peaceful protesters. "They're going to manufacture a riot," Captain Williams observed, monitoring police radio traffic from their secure location. "There's chatter about deploying provocateurs to justify a crackdown." "Intercept and neutralize," Jamal ordered. "Non-lethal containment only. And get me eyes inside the governor's office. If the National Guard gets deployed, I need to know who they'll be taking orders from." Governor Philip Whitman was indeed considering mobilizing the National Guard under pressure from both Hargrove's political network and the growing media attention. At 58, Whitman harbored ambitions for national office and was carefully calculating his response for maximum political benefit. "The governor has just been contacted by Victor Hargrove," reported Lieutenant Scott Torres, Jamal's intelligence specialist. "Hargrove is pushing for immediate National Guard deployment with specific orders to clear the protesters using all necessary force." "That would create exactly the chaos they want," Jamal noted grimly. "Get me General Hayes immediately." At Memorial Hospital, Tasha Richardson's condition had stabilized following the emergency surgery to remove the deliberately misplaced bullet. Military medical personnel now secured her room with biometric scanners, controlling access. Dr. Elizabeth Reynolds, the Army's top trauma surgeon, had personally overseen the procedure. "Your mother is incredibly strong, Colonel," Dr. Reynolds reported. "She's fighting hard. We've induced a medical coma to help her heal, but her vital signs are improving." Outside in the hallway, a hospital administrator approached with a nervous expression. "Colonel Richardson, I've received calls from the mayor's office and police department demanding that we remove your military security team. They're claiming jurisdiction over a criminal investigation and threatening to revoke our operating licenses if we don't comply." "That won't be happening," Jamal replied firmly. "This hospital is now under temporary military protection due to a national security matter. Anyone attempting to interfere will be detained and questioned. Is that understood? As the administrator retreated, Agent Chen arrived with fresh intelligence. Colonel, we've identified the specific officers and officials involved in the conspiracy across all 12 states. It's a sophisticated network with standardized protocols for targeting community leaders. Tasha was designated as a Tier 1 target due to her effectiveness in registering new voters in key precincts. Why Westridge specifically? Jamal asked, studying the data. It's a testing ground, Chen explained. If their methods work here, they plan to expand to major metropolitan areas before the next election. Your mother's shooting was meant to send a message to other organizers. Meanwhile, in the hospital parking garage, Jamal confronted Officer Kelson, who had arrived to begin his shift guarding Tasha's room before the military took over security. "Officer Kelson!" Jamal called out, causing the man to freeze beside his vehicle. "Colonel Richardson," Kelson replied, hand instinctively moving toward his weapon before recognizing the foolishness of threatening a Delta Force commander. "I want to express my sincere regrets about—" "Save it," Jamal interrupted. "I'm not here for apologies. I want to know who gave you specific orders regarding my mother." Kelson's face registered surprise before he could mask it. "I don't know what you're talking about. We responded to a suspicious person call." "We both know that's a lie. My team has already accessed your text messages, including the one you received at 15:45 hours instructing you to neutralize the Richardson situation." "Who sent that message?" Kelson's confidence crumbled under Jamal's unwavering gaze. "Look, I'm just following orders. Chief Richard said she was a threat to community stability, said she was working with outside agitators to cause trouble in our town. I didn't know she was your mother. And that would have made a difference if she had been any other 62-year-old black woman. Her shooting would have been acceptable." Kelson had no answer. "You have one opportunity to cooperate, Officer Kelson. Tell me everything about the targeting program, and I'll ensure your cooperation is noted when the federal indictments come down." Across town, military surveillance captured a clandestine meeting between Chief Richard's Mayor Collins and several federal officials from the Department of Homeland Security. The discussion centered around containing the situation in Westridge before it exposed the larger national operation. "This was supposed to be a routine neutralization of a community agitator," one official complained. "Now we have military involvement and growing media attention." "Richardson's son complicated things," the chief responded defensively. "How were we supposed to know she had family in Delta Force? Your job was to know everything about the targets before taking action," Mayor Collins snapped. "Now we have protesters everywhere and journalists asking questions." "The governor will deploy the National Guard tomorrow," the federal official assured them. "Once we have control of the streets, we can manage the narrative. The hospital is our primary concern. The woman cannot be allowed to regain consciousness and make statements." Back at the hospital, Tasha Richardson's eyes suddenly opened. Though weak, she recognized her son immediately. "Jamal," she whispered. "They weren't just after me. There's a list. All the organizers in the Southeast. They're targeting anyone helping black voters register. Rest, Mom." Jamal soothed, squeezing her hand gently. "We know about the list. We're protecting everyone on it now." "The evidence," she continued urgently. "In my library office, behind the Morrison collection. I have been documenting everything for months. Names, dates, patterns of harassment. I knew something was happening." Jamal nodded, already signaling Captain Williams to secure the library immediately. "You just focus on getting better. I promise you everyone responsible will face justice." As Tasha drifted back to sleep, Jamal received an alert that the governor had signed the National Guard deployment order effective at dawn. The next 24 hours would determine whether justice would prevail or whether the conspiracy would succeed in burying the truth, along with those brave enough to stand for it. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, officially opened an investigation into the Westridge Police Department at 6 a.m., just as National Guard units began positioning themselves around the city. Assistant Attorney General Marcus Johnson had personally signed the authorization after reviewing the preliminary evidence provided by Agent Chen and Colonel Richardson. The Justice Department's involvement complicated the conspiracy's plan to use the National Guard to suppress protests and control the narrative. Inside Tasha Richardson's hospital room, Captain Williams discovered 3 sophisticated listening devices hidden in medical equipment. They were installed during the shift change last night. She reported to Jamal. Hospital security footage shows an unidentified maintenance worker entering the room for approximately 90 seconds. Can we trace the transmission? Already done, sir. The signal was being routed to a van parked 2 blocks away. We've identified the occupants as private contractors with connections to Sentinel Services, one of Hargrove's subsidiaries. Jamal nodded grimly. Feed them disinformation. Let them think my mother's condition is deteriorating. Meanwhile, set up a secure video link to the Pentagon. General Hayes needs to brief the Joint Chiefs immediately. In Washington, General Hayes faced unexpected resistance as he presented the evidence of domestic military contractors operating against American citizens. You're suggesting that defense contractors are working with local police to suppress voter registration? General Frank Marshall questioned skeptically. At 68, Marshall represented the conservative old guard within military leadership. Not suggesting Frank, proving, Hayes countered, displaying financial records and surveillance photographs. Hargrove's network has established operations in 12 states using military-grade intelligence techniques developed for counterinsurgency operations overseas. They've redirected those capabilities against American citizens exercising their constitutional rights. Even if this is accurate, the military has no jurisdiction in domestic law enforcement, another Joint Chief argued. The Posse Comitatus Act prohibits exactly this kind of military intervention. This isn't law enforcement, Hayes responded firmly. This is a direct threat to national security and constitutional order. When private military contractors use techniques developed with Pentagon funding to undermine democratic processes that fall squarely within our mandate to protect against all enemies, foreign and domestic. While the Pentagon debate continued, Tasha Richardson's condition suddenly deteriorated. Alarms blared as medical staff rushed into her room. Blood pressure dropping rapidly, Dr. Reynolds announced, checking monitors. She's going into shock. I need a toxicology screen immediately. Tests revealed a powerful anticoagulant had somehow been introduced into Tasha's IV line, causing internal bleeding to resume. Military medical personnel worked frantically to stabilize her condition, while Jamal faced an impossible choice: stay with his mother or pursue the investigation that would bring her attackers to justice. Go, Dr. Reynolds told him after Tasha was stabilized. We've implemented Level 1 security protocols. No one gets near her without biometric verification. Your mother is fighting for something bigger than herself. Honor that fight. Across town, Agent Chen received notice of her immediate suspension from the FBI. Her supervisor, Assistant Director Thomas Warner, had cited procedural violations and unauthorized investigation. When Chen attempted to access her files, she discovered her credentials had been revoked and her evidence archive locked. They're shutting me down, she informed Jamal during a secure call. Warner has connections to several of Hargrove's defense contracts. This goes higher than I thought. Report to our secure location immediately, Jamal instructed. You're now operating under Military Intelligence Authority. Outside the hospital and police station, protesters faced increasingly militarized response teams. National Guard units had established checkpoints throughout Westridge, ostensibly to maintain public safety, but effectively limiting movement in and out of black neighborhoods. Olivia Dela Cruz's first major article had hit the Atlanta Tribune's front page and gone viral online, challenging the official narrative and raising questions about the targeting of black community leaders. The headline read, "Targeted Attack or Random Incident Military Officer's Mother Shot by Police After Voter Registration Drive." Hargrove immediately deployed his media contacts to discredit the story, suggesting that outside agitators and anti-police radicals were exploiting an unfortunate incident. Mayor Collins called a press conference standing flanked by police officers. "We will not allow our community to be torn apart by unsubstantiated allegations and violent protests. The National Guard has been deployed to ensure the safety of all citizens while we conduct a thorough investigation into the Richardson incident." Meanwhile, Jamal's team implemented a sophisticated counterintelligence operation, intercepting communications between conspirators while feeding false information through channels they knew were compromised. "They're planning to create a violent incident tonight," Lieutenant Torres reported, monitoring intercepted communications. "Provocateurs embedded with protesters have been instructed to damage property and provoke Guard response. They'll use the resulting chaos to justify a citywide crackdown and restrict media access." "Identify and neutralize the provocateurs," Jamal ordered. "And get me a secure meeting with Mayor Collins. It's time to apply direct pressure." The meeting took place in a deserted parking garage reminiscent of Deep Throat's revelations during Watergate. Mayor Collins arrived visibly nervous, glancing repeatedly over his shoulder. "You're placing me in an impossible position, Colonel," Collins began. "I have obligations and political realities to consider." "You have a constitutional oath and legal responsibilities," Jamal countered, playing a recording of Collins's meeting with Hargrove discussing the neutralization of community leaders. "Right now, you're facing conspiracy charges in the attempted murder of my mother and the suppression of constitutional rights across multiple states." Collins paled. "You don't understand the reach Hargrove has. This goes beyond Westridge, beyond Georgia even. There's a nationwide strategy to ensure certain voting demographics don't impact the next elections. Hargrove just provides the funding and expertise. The authorization comes from much higher." "How high?" Jamal pressed. Collins hesitated before answering. "Cabinet level, possibly beyond. I don't know all the details. They compartmentalize information precisely to prevent anyone from seeing the full picture. I only know my piece of it. You have one opportunity to choose the right side of this, Mayor. Provide us with everything you know, and I'll ensure your cooperation is noted." As Collins departed with a secure communication device to deliver promised evidence, Jamal received word that military intelligence had uncovered a direct link between Hargrove's operations and a classified program originally developed for overseas election influence operations. The tools of foreign intervention had been turned against American citizens. The revelation would shake the Pentagon to its foundations, raising profound questions about military contractors' oversight and the weaponization of counterinsurgency techniques against domestic populations. The pieces were finally coming together, revealing a conspiracy far more extensive and organized than a single incident of police violence in a small Georgia town. What had begun with Tasha Richardson's shooting was unraveling a plot that threatened the very foundations of American democracy. Military intelligence analysts worked through the night compiling evidence from 12 states into a comprehensive briefing document codenamed Operation Blackout. The name had not been chosen by Jamal's team, but discovered within the conspirators' own communications, revealing their ultimate objective: the systematic disenfranchisement of black voters across key electoral districts nationwide. The evidence was damning. Hargrove's technology companies had secured voting machine contracts in 7 battleground states while simultaneously funding election integrity initiatives that purged voter rolls in predominantly black districts. His private security firms provided consultation to police departments, training officers to target community organizers using counterinsurgency techniques developed for warfare. Financial records revealed over $200 million channeled through a labyrinthine network of shell companies, all leading back to Hargrove's central operation. This isn't just voter suppression, Agent Chen observed, reviewing the documents. It's a coordinated assault on black political participation, designed to appear as isolated incidents of local enforcement rather than a national strategy. Jamal nodded grimly. And my mother stumbled onto a piece of it through her voter registration work. She represented exactly what they feared: an organized, respected community leader who could mobilize new voters in significant numbers. At Memorial Hospital, Tasha Richardson had emerged from her second surgery with improved vital signs. The military medical team maintained round-the-clock security with multiple redundant systems monitoring her condition. Dr. Reynolds reported cautious optimism about her recovery, though the 3 gunshot wounds had caused substantial trauma. "She's stabilized but still critical," the doctor informed Jamal during his brief visit between operations. "Your mother has extraordinary resilience, Colonel. Most patients her age wouldn't have survived these injuries and the subsequent complications." What the medical team didn't yet realize was that another attempt on Tasha's life was already in motion. Hospital security footage reviewed hours later would show an orderly accessing the medication storage room at 3:27 a.m., removing something from his pocket and tampering with a specific IV bag. Only the military team's protocol of testing all medications before administration prevented the poison solution from reaching Tasha's bloodstream. Captain Williams traced the fake orderly to a Sentinel Services safe house across town. "We've identified him as former Special Forces discharged 3 years ago and immediately hired by Hargrove's security division. He's part of a specialized unit they call problem solvers." "Take him into custody," Jamal ordered. "Use whatever force is necessary, but I want him alive for questioning." The extraction team moved with precision, securing the target without casualties. Under interrogation, the man revealed a nationwide network of similar operatives, all former military or intelligence personnel, now working to suppress voting rights and eliminate problematic influences in black communities. In Washington, the evidence presented by General Hayes had created a schism within military leadership. Some officers were appalled at the use of military tactics against American citizens and demanded immediate action. Others worried about overstepping the military's authority in domestic affairs. "We're walking a constitutional tightrope," General Marshall argued during a closed-door session with the Joint Chiefs. "Military intervention in civilian matters, regardless of the justification, sets a dangerous precedent." "What's the alternative?" Hayes countered. "Allow private military contractors to wage psychological warfare against American citizens. Permit techniques developed for counterterrorism to be used for voter suppression. That's the more dangerous precedent." The debate reached the White House, where President Catherine Winters faced her own difficult decision. At 60, Winters had built her political career on pragmatic centrism, often avoiding direct confrontation with powerful interests. The evidence placed before her by military intelligence could not be ignored, but acting on it would create powerful enemies. "The constitutional implications are significant, Madam President," her chief legal counsel advised. "But the evidence of coordinated efforts to suppress voting rights using military-derived techniques presents a unique threat to democratic processes." "What's Colonel Richardson's status update?" the President asked, referring to the officer whose mother's shooting had triggered the investigation. "Still gathering evidence, ma'am. His team has uncovered connections to several high-level officials, including potential links to certain cabinet departments. He's requested additional resources and authorization to expand the investigation." "Proceed cautiously," the President decided. "No public statements until we have irrefutable evidence and a complete understanding of who's involved. This has the potential to become the most significant civil rights case in decades." While Washington deliberated, Jamal's team continued their methodical work. They discovered a digital archive of target packages on community leaders across the country, complete with surveillance photos, personal information, and vulnerability assessments. The documents used military terminology and formatting, further confirming the connection to defense contractors. "They've been monitoring my mother for 6 months," Jamal noted, reviewing her file. "Tracking her movements, analyzing her social networks, identifying her as a key node in community organization efforts." The file included photographs of Tasha at church, the grocery store, and working with young people at voter registration drives. It noted her significant influence with younger voters and ability to mobilize previously disengaged demographics. In another section of the city, Olivia Dela Cruz's reporting had gained national attention. Major networks had picked up the story, sending correspondents to Westridge as protests continued to grow despite the National Guard presence. Her latest article detailed the connection between Hargrove's companies and the suspicious technical failures of voting machines in predominantly black districts during previous elections. Hargrove, recognizing the growing threat to his operation, had begun implementing contingency plans. Secure servers were being wiped, documents shredded, and key personnel evacuated from Westridge. His private jet was being prepared for immediate departure to a country without extradition treaties with the United States. "He's running a..." Lieutenant Torres reported, monitoring communications from Hargrove's mansion. "And he's taking something called the blueprint with him," referenced as a classified document detailing the entire operation across all states. "Intercept him," Jamal ordered. "Whatever the blueprint is, we need it as evidence. Use all necessary resources." Do you think powerful interests should be able to use military tactics against citizens exercising their constitutional rights? Comment number 1. If you believe this represents a dangerous threat to democracy that must be stopped. Comment number 2. If you think Colonel Richardson is justified in using military resources to expose this conspiracy. This story reveals how techniques developed for warfare have been turned against American citizens. Like and subscribe to learn how deep this conspiracy goes and whether justice will prevail. What would you do if you discovered a nationwide plot to suppress voting rights in your community? The answers may shock you as our story continues. The morning dawned with an unexpected development that shifted the power dynamics in Westridge. Despite the National Guard checkpoints and police presence, over 2,000 citizens had gathered peacefully in Centennial Park, directly across from City Hall. The crowd was remarkable for its diversity, including people from all racial backgrounds, ages, and social classes. Many carried signs with Tasha Richardson's photo and the words, "Justice for All," emblazoned beneath her image. Local faith leaders had organized the gathering, deliberately avoiding confrontation while maintaining a powerful symbolic presence in the heart of the city. Reverend James Washington, pastor of Tasha's church, addressed the assembled crowd. "Today, we stand not just for our sister Tasha, but for the sacred right of every American to participate in democracy without fear. What happened to her represents a larger pattern of intimidation and suppression that we will no longer tolerate in silence." Rather than protest chants, the crowd maintained periods of prayerful silence, interspersed with gospel songs that echoed through the downtown streets. The dignified nature of the gathering made it impossible for authorities to justify aggressive crowd control measures, especially with national media broadcasting live coverage. Meanwhile, community organizers had transformed the church basement into a voter registration center, processing record numbers of new registrants despite the ongoing tensions. People stood in lines stretching around the block, many explicitly stating they were registering because of what happened to Tasha. "They tried to silence one voice," Reverend Washington told reporters. "Instead, they've awakened thousands." In Washington, Colonel Richardson faced a potential court-martial for his unauthorized intelligence operations. A formal complaint had been filed by officials connected to Hargrove's extensive network of influence. General Hayes put his own career on the line, appearing personally before the Military Justice Review Board. Colonel Richardson's actions, while unorthodox, were entirely consistent with his oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, Hayes argued. The evidence he has uncovered reveals a direct threat to constitutional order and democratic processes. If defending those principles warrants punishment, then the military has lost its way. While the military debate continued, Agent Chen had gone completely off-grid, working with a small team of trusted FBI colleagues who shared her concerns about corruption within the Bureau. They had established a secure server containing copies of all evidence related to Operation Blackout, ready to release to multiple media outlets if attempts were made to suppress the investigation. Chen's team made a breakthrough when they discovered and released confidential files showing systematic discrimination within multiple police departments connected to Hargrove's network. The documents included training materials instructing officers how to target Black community leaders while maintaining plausible deniability and avoiding civil rights violation charges. The revelations created a firestorm of public outrage, making it increasingly difficult for officials to dismiss the allegations as conspiracy theories or isolated incidents. In West Ridge, Officer James Barrett made the difficult decision to break ranks with his department. Troubled by his role in Tasha's shooting and the subsequent cover-up attempts, he contacted Olivia Dela Cruz, offering to testify about departmental practices and specific orders regarding problem individuals in the Black community. "We were given lists of people to watch, harass, and intimidate," Barrett told Dela Cruz in a recorded interview. Tasha Richardson was designated as a priority target because of her voter registration work. The shooting wasn't a mistake or misunderstanding. It was the deliberate silencing of someone considered a threat to certain political interests. Barrett's testimony provided crucial first-hand evidence of the conspiracy reaching into local law enforcement. His cooperation created fractures within the police department as other officers fearing eventual prosecution began coming forward with information. Chief Richards, sensing his control slipping away, implemented a desperate plan to crack down on protesters using excessive force, hoping to provoke a violent response that would justify more aggressive measures. He deployed riot squads with orders to use all necessary means to clear the streets regardless of the peaceful nature of the gatherings. Governor Whitman found himself caught between Hargrove's considerable influence and growing public pressure as images of peaceful citizens facing militarized police dominated national news. His political calculations had assumed a quick resolution to the West Ridge situation, not sustained coverage that was beginning to damage his approval ratings. When his chief of staff presented polling showing a 15-point drop in support among moderate voters, Whitman began reconsidering his position. Meanwhile, Jamal's team had implemented strategic countermeasures to protect civilians from police aggression. They provided protest organizers with secure communication systems, deployed teams to document police actions, and established medical stations to treat anyone injured during demonstrations. These measures, combined with strict discipline among protesters, prevented the violence Richards had hoped to provoke, further undermining the justification for aggressive police tactics. At Memorial Hospital, Tasha Richardson regained consciousness fully for the first time since the shooting. Though weak, her mind remained sharp. With military security ensuring her safety, she provided a detailed statement about the events leading to her shooting and her months of documentation regarding voter suppression tactics in West Ridge. "They began with small intimidations," she recounted. "Police cars following people home from registration drives, spurious tickets and citations for community leaders, sudden building code violations for churches hosting voter education events. When those tactics didn't work, they escalated to more direct threats." Her testimony, recorded and secured by military intelligence, provided a crucial first-hand account that connected local harassment to the larger national strategy. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. Military satellite surveillance, originally focused on Hargrove's mansion, captured communications, confirming the conspiracy extended to federal officials. The encrypted transmissions decoded by intelligence specialists contained explicit references to Operation Blackout and its objectives of reducing black voter participation in key districts through systematic intimidation and selective enforcement actions. As evidence mounted, Hargrove attempted to flee the country boarding his private jet with a briefcase reportedly containing the blueprint and other classified documents detailing the entire voter suppression network. What he didn't realize was that his pilot had been replaced by a military operative. Instead of an international destination, the jet landed at a secure military facility where Hargrove was taken into custody. The documents seized from his possession provided the final pieces of evidence needed to confirm the nationwide conspiracy and identify all major participants. President Winters presented with irrefutable evidence that members of her own administration were involved in the conspiracy, made the difficult decision to authorize a full Justice Department investigation with special prosecutor authority. "The right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy," she announced in a televised address. "Any organized effort to suppress that right strikes at the very heart of our constitutional order. This administration will ensure that all those involved, regardless of position or influence, are held accountable under the law." The presidential address marked a turning point in the Westridge situation and the larger national reckoning it had triggered. What began with one woman being shot for the crime of registering black voters had exposed a sophisticated nationwide conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. For Tasha Richardson, watching the president's address from her hospital bed with her son at her side, the moment represented both personal vindication and the promise that her near sacrifice would lead to meaningful change. The Department of Justice took formal control of the Westridge investigation, dispatching a team of federal prosecutors specialized in civil rights violations and conspiracy cases. Their arrival transformed the dynamic in the small Georgia town, as local officials, who had previously closed ranks around the police department, now faced potential federal charges for obstruction of justice and conspiracy against rights. Assistant Attorney General Josephine Banks personally led the team, establishing headquarters in the federal building downtown. "We are investigating what appears to be the most extensive organized effort to suppress constitutional rights since the civil rights era," Banks announced at her initial press conference. "The evidence suggests a sophisticated operation targeting black community leaders and voters across multiple jurisdictions. No one involved in these activities is beyond the reach of federal prosecution, regardless of position or influence." As Banks spoke, military units secured the Westridge Police Department headquarters, acting on intelligence that evidence destruction was imminent. They arrived just as Chief Richards was attempting to delete server files containing communications related to the targeting of black community members. The chief was taken into federal custody, charged with obstruction of justice conspiracy against rights and attempted murder in the shooting of Tasha Richardson. National media descended on Westridge with round-the-clock coverage of what commentators were calling the voting rights conspiracy of the century. Journalists uncovered similar patterns in other cities, connecting local incidents to the nationwide operation detailed in Hargrove's seized documents. Black community leaders who had faced harassment, false arrests, or unexplained traffic stops began coming forward with their experiences, creating a comprehensive picture of systematic intimidation designed to discourage political participation. Tasha Richardson, now recovering steadily under military medical care, addressed the community via video from her hospital bed. Her dignified presence and unwavering commitment to democratic principles made a powerful impression on viewers nationwide. "What happened to me was not an isolated incident or a misunderstanding," she stated firmly. "It was part of a calculated effort to silence voices like mine that work to ensure every citizen can participate in our democracy. The bullet that struck me was aimed not just at one person, but at the very idea that all Americans deserve equal access to the ballot box." Her words resonated across the country, inspiring renewed voter registration efforts in communities that had previously faced intimidation. Volunteers reported record numbers of new registrants, many explicitly stating they were registering for Tasha. Governor Whitman, recognizing the shifting political winds, publicly requested federal intervention, attempting to distance himself from his previous support of the harsh crackdown. His statement carefully avoided mentioning his numerous meetings with Hargrove and financial connections to companies implicated in the conspiracy. The people of Georgia deserve a full and impartial investigation into these serious allegations. Whitman declared, positioning himself as a champion of transparency, despite having attempted to suppress the investigation days earlier. In Washington, congressional leaders announced hearings to investigate the nationwide conspiracy, with particular focus on the use of military contractors and techniques against American citizens. The hearings would examine how counterinsurgency methods developed for overseas operations had been redirected toward domestic population control, raising profound questions about oversight and accountability in the military-industrial complex. Officer Ryan Kelson, who had fired the shots that nearly killed Tasha, was apprehended attempting to cross the Canadian border with forged identification. When confronted with the overwhelming evidence against him and the prospect of federal charges carrying life imprisonment, he agreed to testify against the entire network in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His testimony provided crucial details about the targeting program, including the specific training officers received in identifying and neutralizing community leaders considered threats to certain political interests. Olivia De La Cruz's reporting on the conspiracy earned her nomination for the Pulitzer Prize, with her detailed exposés credited for bringing national attention to what might otherwise have remained a local story of police violence. Her latest article revealed connections between Hargrove's companies and voting machine irregularities in previous elections, suggesting the conspiracy extended beyond intimidation to potential vote manipulation. Agent Chen was reinstated to the FBI, with commendation appointed to lead a new division, specifically tasked with investigating civil rights violations related to voting access. Her persistence, despite institutional resistance, was cited as exemplary service, with the FBI director publicly acknowledging the Bureau's failure to properly investigate her initial reports of coordinated voter suppression. Agent Chen demonstrated the highest ideals of federal service by pursuing justice despite significant obstacles, the director stated. Her actions remind us that our ultimate loyalty must be to the Constitution and the rights it guarantees to all citizens. At the secure military medical facility where Tasha had been transferred, Jamal sat beside his mother's bed, holding her hand as they watched news coverage of Hargrove's arraignment on federal charges. "You were right all along, Mom," he said softly. "When you started documenting the harassment patterns when you refused to be intimidated, you saw the bigger picture before anyone else." Tasha smiled tiredly. "I've lived long enough to recognize the signs, son. The methods change, but the goal remains the same. Prevent black voices from being heard at the ballot box. The only difference now is they use algorithms and police reports instead of literacy tests and poll taxes." Jamal nodded, his expression serious. The final piece just fell into place. Military intelligence decrypted Hargrove's files on something called Project Override. It's a sophisticated plan to manipulate voting machines in specific districts during the next election. If we hadn't caught this now, then my getting shot would have been just the beginning, Tasha finished for him. How many others have been silenced without a son in Delta Force to expose the truth? The question hung in the air between them, highlighting both their victory and the sobering reality that many similar injustices remained hidden. Across town, Marcus confronted Hargrove in a secure federal holding facility. The businessman, stripped of his power and influence, nevertheless maintained an air of smug confidence. "You've won a battle, Colonel, not the war," Hargrove said calmly. "What we built extends far beyond one operation or one election cycle. It's about maintaining the proper power structure in this country." "And who determines what's proper?" Jamal asked, studying the man whose organization had nearly killed his mother. "People who understand how the world actually works," Hargrove replied. Democracy is a noble ideal. But did you ever consider that some people simply aren't equipped to make decisions about the nation's future? We were providing guidance, ensuring stability. By shooting 62-year-old librarians, by targeting community leaders for harassment and intimidation. That's not guidance, Mr. Hargrove. That's tyranny disguised as paternalism. Hargrove shrugged. History will judge whether our methods were justified. The chaos you've unleashed by exposing our operation may ultimately prove our point. As Jamal left the facility, he reflected on Hargrove's words and the mindset they revealed. The conspiracy wasn't just about one election or one political outcome. It represented a fundamental challenge to the idea of equal citizenship and democratic participation. The battle for justice in Westridge had exposed not just a criminal conspiracy, but an ideological struggle for the soul of American democracy itself. 6 months after the shooting that nearly claimed her life, Tasha Richardson walked slowly but steadily to the witness table in the packed congressional hearing room. At 62, she carried herself with the quiet dignity that had defined her throughout the ordeal, nodding respectfully to the committee members before taking her seat. The assembled representatives fell silent as she began her testimony. I come before you not just as a victim of violence, but as a witness to a systematic assault on our democratic principles. Tasha stated, her voice clear and unwavering. What happened to me in Westridge was not an isolated incident of police misconduct. It was one visible manifestation of a nationwide conspiracy to prevent Black citizens from exercising their constitutional right to vote. For the next 2 hours, Tasha detailed her experiences with remarkable precision, from the initial intimidation tactics used against voter registration volunteers to the moment Officer Kelson fired 3 shots into her body. Her testimony, combined with the mountain of evidence gathered by military intelligence, the FBI and Department of Justice investigators, painted a comprehensive picture of Operation Blackout's scope and ambitions. The bullet that struck me was aimed not just at one person, she concluded, but at the very foundation of our democracy, the right of every citizen to have their voice heard through the ballot box. The congressional hearings represented the culmination of investigations that had uncovered a conspiracy far more extensive than anyone had initially imagined. Military intelligence units, acting under General Hayes's authorization, had identified and neutralized voter suppression mechanisms in 26 states, ranging from sophisticated electronic manipulation of voting machines to old-fashioned intimidation and harassment of community organizers. For Colonel Jamal Richardson, the aftermath of his unauthorized operation brought both commendation and consequences. Military leadership remained divided on his actions, with some arguing he had overstepped his authority by deploying military assets in a domestic situation, while others maintained he had fulfilled his oath to defend the Constitution against domestic enemies. The compromise solution left him in command, but with a formal reprimand in his file, a small price to pay for exposing a threat to democratic processes. General Hayes faced no such ambiguity in his fate. His decisive leadership during the crisis and willingness to risk his career to defend constitutional principles earned him nomination to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he would implement new oversight protocols for military contractors and strengthen the firewall between foreign operations and domestic activities. In the Justice Department's massive case against the conspiracy participants, the evidence proved overwhelming. Officer Ryan Kelson and Police Chief Warren Richards faced federal indictments for civil rights violations, attempted murder, and conspiracy against rights. Mayor Collins, in exchange for his cooperation, received a reduced sentence but still faced significant prison time for his role in facilitating the operation in Westridge. Victor Hargrove, identified as the primary architect and financier of the nationwide conspiracy, confronted multiple federal charges carrying potential life sentences. His network of companies was placed under federal receivership with assets frozen pending completion of all investigations and trials. The national reckoning extended beyond criminal prosecutions. Congress introduced comprehensive police reform legislation, including enhanced civil rights training, independent oversight mechanisms, and stricter penalties for civil rights violations. Provisions specifically addressed the use of law enforcement as tools of voter intimidation, with new protections for community organizers and voter registration activities. Tasha, still recovering from her injuries, but determined to continue her life's work, established the Richardson Foundation for Voting Rights, dedicated to protecting access to the ballot box for marginalized communities across the country. The foundation would train community organizers, provide legal support against intimidation tactics, and monitor election practices nationwide. "What doesn't kill you gives you purpose," she told supporters at the foundation's launch event. "My purpose now is ensuring no other community faces what we experienced in Westridge." Agent Naomi Chen accepted appointment as director of the FBI's new Civil Rights Enforcement Division, with a specific mandate to investigate and prosecute organized efforts to suppress voting rights. Her first official act was to establish a whistleblower protection program for law enforcement officers who reported civil rights violations within their departments. Officer James Barrett, whose testimony had proved crucial in exposing the Westridge conspiracy, became the program's first participant, helping to develop training materials for officers nationwide on resisting institutional pressure to violate citizens' rights. For Jamal, the aftermath brought difficult decisions about his military future. The experience had revealed both the strengths and limitations of military power in addressing domestic injustice. After long discussions with his mother during her recovery, he made the decision to retire from active service and establish a security consulting firm specializing in protecting community organizations from surveillance and intimidation. "The skills I developed protecting American interests abroad are now needed to protect American rights at home," he explained at his retirement ceremony. Throughout Westridge and beyond, a process of community healing began founded on accountability rather than forgetting. Town hall meetings brought citizens together to discuss reforms to police practices, with significant representation from neighborhoods that had previously been marginalized in local governance. New leadership in the police department implemented community oversight boards with actual enforcement authority, transforming the relationship between officers and the communities they served. Eleanor's final confrontation with Mayor Collins came not in a courtroom, but in a restorative justice session he had requested before beginning his prison sentence. "I want to understand," he told her, "how someone with my background ended up participating in something so fundamentally wrong." "Power corrupts incrementally," Tasha replied after careful consideration. "Each compromise seems small until you find yourself ordering the shooting of an unarmed woman for registering voters. The path back begins with acknowledging the humanity of those you've wronged." What neither of them realized during that meeting was that an FBI analyst had just uncovered evidence suggesting the conspiracy extended even further than previously known. Hidden in encrypted files on Hargrove's servers, investigators discovered communications with political operatives in other countries, indicating a transnational effort to undermine democratic processes across multiple nations. The revelation would eventually lead to new investigations and a deeper understanding of the global threats facing democratic institutions. 1 year after the shooting, Tasha Richardson cast her ballot in a special election surrounded by community members who had organized a protection walk to ensure her safety. As she emerged from the polling station, a spontaneous cheer erupted from the gathered crowd. The moment symbolized both personal triumph over violence and a community's determination to preserve its democratic voice against all efforts to silence it. "Today," she told the assembled supporters and media, "we demonstrate that bullets cannot stop ballots, that intimidation cannot overcome determination, and that justice, though delayed, will not be denied." The story of Westridge and Operation Blackout would be taught in law schools, police academies, and civil rights curricula for generations to come. a powerful reminder of both the fragility and resilience of democratic institutions in the face of organized suppression. For Tasha Richardson, the librarian who became an unlikely catalyst for national change, the greatest victory was not just surviving, but transforming her personal trauma into a movement that strengthened the very democratic principles her attackers had sought to undermine. What would you do if faced with systematic attempts to suppress your constitutional rights? Would you have the courage to stand up like Tasha Richardson? Comment below with your thoughts on how ordinary citizens can protect democracy when institutions fail. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to understand the ongoing struggle for voting rights in America. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most significant civil rights cases of our time. And remember, justice prevails when brave individuals refuse to be silenced. This story illustrates how systemic racism continues to manifest in modern America, often hiding behind badges, policies, and political strategies. Tasha Richardson's experience reveals that the fight for voting rights remains as crucial today as it was during the civil rights movement, with tactics evolving from overt violence to sophisticated suppression operations. It demonstrates how power structures will go to extraordinary lengths to maintain control, including weaponizing law enforcement against citizens exercising constitutional rights. The courage of individuals like Tasha, who continue their civic engagement despite intimidation, shows that grassroots determination can ultimately overcome organized oppression. The story also highlights the importance of institutional allies, people within systems who choose justice over loyalty to corrupt power. When Jamal Agent Chen, Officer Barrett, and General Hayes used their positions to expose wrongdoing, they proved that systems can be reformed from within by people of conscience. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative reminds us that democracy requires constant vigilance and active participation. Rights not exercised can become rights lost, and the ballot remains our most powerful tool against injustice. What would you do if you witnessed racial injustice in your community? Would you have the courage to stand up like Tasha Richardson, even at great personal risk? This story shows how a single person's determination can expose corruption at the highest levels. Have you ever experienced or witnessed voter intimidation or subtle forms of discrimination at the polls? Share your story in the comments below. If you believe protecting voting rights is essential to democracy, hit that like button to show your support. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about ordinary heroes fighting systemic racism, and subscribe to join our community of people committed to justice and equality. Don't keep this important message to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the ongoing struggle for equal rights in America. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Together we can build a more just society where everyone's voice matters.